Hello and welcome to Smaulgld. In case you missed it, top gold and silver stories for the week ended September 24th. This is why China's credit rating was downgraded. S&P's China downgrade to upper medium grade comes after Moody's downgrade in May. We're going to talk about China's debt monster and its impact on its credit rating. U.S. says Venezuela oil embargo is an option. This is a story we covered early in the week, has received very little coverage, and we're going to talk about that briefly as well. Tesla will settle charges that it tried to cheat the government. It's another story we'll cover. And then Trump criticizes NFL players for taking the knee. We're going to ask a couple of economic questions on what the role of the NFL is in politics. And Jamie Dimon slammed Bitcoin again. So let's get to the stories of the week. And the top story, we want to talk about the Chinese debt monster. So China's credit rating was downgraded. S&P downgrades China's credit rating, citing heavy debt load. China's debt load is largely ignored in the gold community, mainly because there's stories out there that they're part of the BRICS and they're going to take down the dollar and they buy gold. Now, that's a narrative that has some truth, but the people that promote that narrative rarely look past the statements about China and the BRICS and the dollar collapse. They barely look at the numbers as to how far along China is to even actually achieving that. Later this week, we're going to take a look at the use of the dollar in international transactions versus other currencies, and you'll see it's basically unchanged for the last 5 years. We're also going to take a look at the amount of dollars that are held in reserve by other countries, and basically it's the US Treasury. Since the Chinese yuan has been added to the SDR basket in October 2016, very, very small amounts of reserves in Chinese yuan have been taken on by countries. So the concept, people see a billboard, China, the world reserve currency, they got gold on it. That's hype. That doesn't reflect the reality of what's actually happening. And also, we're going to go through later in the week what the BRICS actually are. If you take China out of the equation, the BRICS are a mess. Other than Russia's not a mess, but India is not doing very well. Brazil is a basket case, and South Africa is a non-entity. So when they talk about what the BRICS are going to do, we need to look at the numbers behind the BRICS. The world's GDP, take China out of it, and is 80% outside of the BRICS countries, even higher. So the idea that the BRICS are this formidable entity, when each of them have their own issues, political issues in Brazil, political issues in South Africa, declining geopolitical importance in South Africa, they really don't have as much gold as they used to anymore. Russia's done a good job of keeping its finances straight, but basically Russia is a geopolitical power with a lot of oil and a good partnership with China and decent relationships with Europe, and has little trade with the United States. But that doesn't make the BRICS out to be this dominating world force that's going to crash the dollar. Now let's look at what S&P's downgrade means. Now, this is not a defense of the dollar or the excessive debt that the United States has, the unfunded, underfunded liabilities, the blowing through the debt ceiling all the time. I'm just making the point that you have to know what you're up against when you look at these other countries. And also, the United States does have at least more than some semblance to a free market. Remember, China is 100% centrally controlled. And for those of you who are sound money people and people who believe in liberty and believe in free markets, you know that centrally planned economies generally fail. But for whatever reason, because they have gold, some people think, oh, well, that means they like sound money. No, they don't. As we're going to see, the amount of debt that they have indicates the exact opposite. And this idea that they're going to back a gold-backed yuan and sell oil is nonsense. That is a story that was just planted, was published in one place, with no source whatsoever, no official source from the Chinese government, and has been repeated by everyone as if this is happening. It's not. Now, S&P's downgrade, let's take a look what it means. So the top grading for credit is AAA. Not surprisingly, the U.S. no longer has that. It has an S&P rating of high grade just below AAA, which Canada, Australia, I think Sweden has it. There's a few other countries. China has been dropped down to upper medium grade with Japan. Now, Japan is even worse off than China. It has even more debt. And Japan's debt is basically backstopped and bought by the Bank of Japan. And they have less productive capacity than China. But you can see the ratings agencies now all have the equivalent of an A+ or an upper medium grade rating on China. But let's look at the BRICS. Look how far down India is. Then you got Russia, South Africa, Brazil. These are not powerhouse countries. China is a powerhouse country, but it has its own debt issues. It has its own problems with feeding and keeping its population satisfied and controlling its population. It is not only concerned about waking up in the morning, finding gold and crashing the dollar, as which that's the one side of the story you only hear. China is playing the long game. No, they're trying to play an immediate game. They're trying to keep everything, they're trying to keep the wheels on the car while the economy is moving ahead full steam, because they're borrowing a lot of money to pump up the economy. Well, if you know anything about debt, that doesn't work. And we know that China has massive amounts of debt, and a lot of it was debt incurred just to produce phony GDP in the form of ghost cities and other projects that perhaps they didn't need. Let's continue down. So the Bank of International Settlements says the Chinese corporate debt was 170% of GDP. That doesn't sound like prudent to me. I don't care how much gold you have. Up 100% from 2008, which is 2 times the average of other economies. Now, they claim the debt is mostly owned by state-owned companies. They also own assets, the ghost cities or whatever. And they owe it to themselves. Debt is debt. Yes, you can make the distinction. It's not owed to foreigners. They owe it to themselves, so therefore it's okay. But that's moving money from one of your pockets to the other. Now, Bloomberg says that China's total debt is now 2.5 times the size of its economy. And if you have slower growth, that's going to make it harder to service the debt load, which they say is 1/3 of their GDP. Well, of course, China's growth is going to slow unless they keep borrowing money. It's all Keynesian, communist, central planning stuff. But people don't seem to realize that China is no better off. It's just probably half a decade behind the U.S. in debt creation. And that's how all the central banks, including the Western and Eastern central banks, including People's Bank of China and the Chinese government, are producing growth. They're doing it through debt. Everyone has this concept that China just produces stuff, and the United States just borrows money, borrows it from China. It doesn't produce anything. That's half the story. China produces stuff, but they also borrow a lot of stuff. And also the United States produces a lot of stuff that we don't realize in the form of semiconductors and even larger items than just refrigerators and cars. But also the United States makes massive amounts of military hardware and jets and things of that nature. So that's another myth, that somehow the United States doesn't produce anything, China produces everything, and the United States just has debt. No, China has a lot of debt. China produces a lot of stuff. The United States produces a lot of stuff. They produce different things. Neither country, I would say, is an ideal model to follow because they're both debt driven. All right, let's see what the other major stories are. We're going to do this through the Twitter feed this week. Well, let's first look at gold and silver. Gold somehow managed not to crack 1300. It fell below 1300 and stayed below. Rallied on Friday but didn't make it. Silver, same thing, didn't manage to get above 17. It went below that during the week and didn't manage to pull above 17 at the end of the week. So the gold silver ratio, again, 76.39 to 1. 5 years of the gold silver ratio is unsustainable. Well, guess what? It's been sustainable. It's gone from 50 to 75. The gold silver ratio has remained elevated despite I would say every silver analyst telling you that it's unsustainable and that it's bound to go up. And we've shown in our other videos that this is not atypical for silver. Silver gets a spike every now and then, maybe every 30 years, and then dives right back down. Gold is far more stable than silver. It's because of the size of the market. You can claim manipulation, but both are manipulated. And if you know there's manipulation, then you would know that it's easier to manipulate silver than it is gold because it's a smaller market. So it's not necessarily unsustainable. It's very sustainable. The gold-silver ratio rarely hasn't even been at 16 to 1 in 100 years. It got there for a brief shining moment in 1980 when it shot up to $50. But for the most part, the gold-silver ratio was far in excess of 16 to 1, far in excess of 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 to 1. That's just the nature of the gold-silver ratio. There's no destiny that is going to 16 to 1. In fact, that 16 to 1 ratio, yes, it was based on relative rarity, but it was fixed by government, not by markets. So when something's fixed by government, it's artificial. Gold and silver are valued, putting aside manipulation, based on relative need and desire and demand. And silver, it doesn't matter how rare it is not desired as much as gold for a variety of reasons which I'm not going to get into right now. All right, so during the week, Trump called the president of Korea Rocket Man. Well, here's something that happened during the week. So we announced, well, it's not that we announced it, but we covered this story at Smaulgld that China was going to issue $2 billion in U.S. denominated bonds. Now that goes against the narrative of de-dollarization because China is going to crash the dollar. You wouldn't even believe that China would issue dollar-denominated bonds, but they are. Well, hold on. There was a story saying they were, and it was in more than one place, and there were Chinese officials cited that they had this intention. Well, the gold-backed yuan story, no Chinese official was cited. It was just a bunch of people that are involved in the gold promotion or dollar bears cited in a story in the Nikkei Asian Review, and they claim there's going to be this gold-backed yuan. Well, look at this. This is my audience here, 58 people. I said that what will China do first? This dollar-denominated bond is supposed to come out at the end of September. The gold-backed yuan, oh, well, maybe it'll happen this year. We're not sure. Maybe it'll happen next year. No, maybe it won't happen at all. But even my audience still thinks that a gold-backed yuan will happen before dollar-denominated bonds in China. That's how strong that story is. That's how people want to believe that story. Not sure. Just a point on Bitcoin. One big difference about Bitcoin and gold is gold doesn't require any human effort. One of the cuts against gold has been it doesn't pay dividends. Yes, that's true. That's because companies improve their lot in the world by innovating, by producing better goods and services, pricing their products, whatever they have to do to produce something more. That's why a company can grow and pay dividends. And gold is already gold. It doesn't do anything more. And that's why gold is a store of value. And stocks and companies are organic living entities that can produce income. When Buffett points that out, I don't know why people think that's a big deal that gold doesn't pay dividends. It's not supposed to. Gold is gold. But when people say Bitcoin is gold, digital gold, it's not. Here's why. Bitcoin isn't just is, meaning if the ecosystem doesn't continue to innovate, doesn't continue to develop, doesn't continue to... The mining's more important to Bitcoin than it is to gold. Once the gold is mined, you don't have to keep verifying that it exists. The gold is the gold is. Someone can maybe do an essay on it, but it's not essential to the existence of gold that people are out there every day looking at the gold and trying to determine whether it's real. Bitcoin requires people, requires innovation, requires electricity, requires an infrastructure. Well, that means it's not like gold, because that's why it doesn't have intrinsic value. Bitcoin requires all this human interaction, all this human intervention, all this human innovation. Well, that makes it more like a company. That's not necessarily a cut on Bitcoin, but that makes it not gold. It's not digital gold. It's not like it just sits there and has value and will have value no matter what. I had an interesting Twitter conversation. Somebody was saying that, if you if you banned gold for 50 years, you can come back and it's still gold. That's true. If they manage to shut down somehow most of the Bitcoin use, or just people lose interest in it, 50 years later, it might not be worth much. Why? Because the infrastructure won't be there to support it. So just a point, people think that I'm out there promoting gold or out there promoting Bitcoin, or I'm trashing one or the other. I'm not. I'm basically trying to look at both of them, or anything that I analyze, and try to be objective. But people that when you say that Bitcoin is not digital gold, they make it sound like you've insulted a family member or their mother. It's just a fact. It's not digital gold. It may have other qualities. It's the same thing when you make a statement about gold that's true but isn't flattering. People get very annoyed. If you say gold isn't money, well, maybe it isn't. Why? It has properties of money, but no, it's not a medium of exchange because no one uses it as a medium of exchange. That doesn't mean gold isn't good. That doesn't mean gold doesn't have all these properties. It just means that maybe it's not money, and that drives people nuts. So people get into this gold promotion or this Bitcoin promotion, and they refuse to see a downside to any part of the particular asset they're looking at, when all assets have their downside. Well, the other thing during the week, a lot of this Chinese stuff I keep hearing, it reminds me of the praise heaped upon Japan in the 80s. Japan's going to take over the world. Japan plays the long game. Japan has strategic this, that. Same thing we're hearing about China. As if somehow, if you just plan out your economy and you get on track for 10, 15 years, and you have all these wonderful innovations and growth, that somehow that's sustainable, that China is going to take over the world. I'm not so sure. A centrally planned economy has never, actually no economy has ever lasted for a long period of time. It's certainly not a centrally planned one. Although we did see the mercantilism of England do very well for a while, when they were able to basically control a lot of the world trade by backing it with the military. We'll see. And again, this is all countries count on growing out of their debt, and no country today more so than China, even more than the United States. I think the United States is thinking of inflating their way out, and China thinks they're going to grow their way out. Debt is debt. If you can't pay it, you can't pay it. Inflating away, growing away, they're both pipe dreams. And again, this BRICS concept, I say the BRICS have very little in common with each other, save the name that Goldman Sachs gave them. They have BRICS conferences. Totally, China, India, Russia, totally different economies, totally different set of domestic issues, totally different credit ratings. Then throw in Brazil and South Africa. That is not a block. They don't have hardly anything in common with each other. No common language. Yeah, they don't like the dollar. That's not the main reason they're together. They're emerging market countries. They have similar issues. Venezuela. Now, I'm seeing people getting excited that Venezuela is not going to take the dollar, and they're going to take the yuan. Like that's somehow a good thing. A communist country and a socialist country. The socialist country is a total basket case. Are not going to use the dollar, and somehow that's to be cheered on. I don't know. I thought these are countries that have political regimes that people might find more distasteful perhaps than the United States when you have a communist and a socialist country. But again, if gold is involved, that's all that matters. Forgive them their communism, forgive them their socialism. These countries may want to crash the dollar, and that's going to help gold. So I'm going to be rich because gold's going to go up. Here's just something I pulled. This is an older article. U.S. dollar share of global currency reserves rise in the fourth quarter. They now have the first quarter of 2017 out. The second quarter will come out soon. The dollar hasn't gone nowhere. The countries are still using it, and still using it as reserves. And all these stories that you hear, we've been hearing them for 5 years. If you look at the data, we'll see during the week, it's basically been no change whatsoever. Now here's the latest story. Someone sent me this. Did you read the article by Soren K. Group about debate in Mexican Congress on whether to monetize its silver Libertad coins? This is a type of story. This is the BS type of story, like the gold back yuan, sovereign size gold buy coming up. COMEX default is going to happen. These are all stories just designed to get you interested, get you excited, think that you know something that no one else knows. This is a non-story. I went to Hugo Salinas' site, Plata de whatever he has, and he writes all this stuff about the Mexican government's looking at the Libertad and they're going to use it and it's not going to have a face. Okay. The bottom of the article, oh, that's all you need to know. He says, this is not the first time that this proposal has come before Mexican Congress, but we pray that this time it becomes reality. We hope so. So this is a hope and a prayer. This isn't going to happen either. But this story makes the rounds. It gets a lot of visits for a week. And then when it doesn't happen, everyone's forgotten about it because they make up some other story about why gold and silver are going to skyrocket. Well, here's the day that S&P downgraded China, saying its rising debt is stoking economic and financial risk. But never mind, they have gold. And gold isn't going to save China from years of centrally planned debt-driven stimulus. Sorry, that's economic fact. Gold does not drive an economy. Gold is a result that you can acquire gold as savings for being productive. But if you're being productive by borrowing money, and you happen to put some of the savings into gold, they don't have as much gold as they have as what they owe. Enough on China unless it comes up again. Jamie Dimon's statement. Now, he said anyone who trades in Bitcoin is an idiot and stupid and deserves to be fired. Then he mentions his daughter bought it. And then he also said in his second double down that governments are going to throw people in jail for even just looking at Bitcoin. So basically he's saying he thinks his daughter's an idiot and one day be thrown in prison. Now, we're going to see a chart later that shows JP Morgan has settled fines for fraud-based charges, $40 billion. Talk about how much you go to jail. All right. Now, here's a thing. Let's see what our followers on Twitter think. Which will have the biggest gain by year end or drop the least? Let's see. I haven't voted on this. Let's leave Litecoin. All right. Let's see where it comes out, what people think on where over the next 6 months, or the next 3 months, the prices will be. And that's taking some time to come up there. But there you go. So it looks like people think Bitcoin will be the top performer. It's pretty scrunched up there. Silver second, gold third, and Litecoin fourth. You want to vote on that, you just go to the website and you go to Twitter, find the tweet, but you can find it easier here and just give it a vote. My vote is Litecoin. Just what I think will happen. Not investment advice, it's just what I think will happen. All right, and Tesla subsidies. Now this story irked me. I normally don't get irked at stores. I just expect this kind of stuff. But Solar City, which is now owned by Tesla, why would a car company have to buy a solar panel company? Well, because Elon Musk is involved with both companies. That's the only reason. Well, they're now going to pay $29.5 million to settle allegations that have tried to cheat the government. So they get this subsidy based on how much it costs for the installations. And of course, it looks like the DOJ is saying they overstated the cost of the installation panels in order to get more money. So these companies, Solar City, Tesla, they get all these subsidies and then they lose money. And supposedly it's good for us. I don't know why. If you look at the Tesla car is marketed to people who have a lot of money already. So rich people are getting subsidies to buy $100,000, $125,000 cars. Because if Tesla wanted to make money, they probably have to charge $500,000 for those cars, battery-powered cars. So I don't know what benefit there is in giving Tesla or Solar City any type of government subsidy. If they can't compete on their own, well, then we don't need them. That's my opinion. Now, let's get to the Donald Trump statement. Now, I'm not interested in the political discussion, whether they kneel or they don't kneel and why they're kneeling. I'm interested in the economic side of this. So the players have decided that at the beginning, when they play the national anthem, they don't want to stand. They feel that somehow the country doesn't deserve. I don't know what the idea is. And they don't like to see the players do that. Okay, that's fine. Here's what I'd like to know. Donald Trump goes and gives a speech in Alabama and says that these SOBs should be fired, or at least one of the owners should fire them because the people don't like this. All right. I don't know if the people, we don't know whether the people say they don't like it. Maybe some people do like it. You hear people saying, oh, they're expressing their freedom of speech. Other people say this is BS because they're overpaid, they're pampered, they're not being harmed in any way in this country. They're being supported. Anyway, I'm not getting into that argument. What I do want to get into, though, is the NFL owners have said we support them in doing this. Now, the question is, if a company supports something that supposedly the people who support the company don't support, then they're working at cross purposes. So my question is, as a matter of economics, will this hurt the NFL if they don't crack down on this, if supposedly the fans don't like it? Now, if the fans either don't care or some of the fans like it, then they won't be harmed at all. But here's the question I asked in a poll. It goes one step further, because the owners are saying they not only just tolerate this from the players, they support the right to do it. Well, then the question becomes, if they support the right to do it, they obviously must think that their fans like it too. Then why not give the players a half an hour before the game to give political speeches, or at halftime? Let them get up there and let them give their speeches. And if the market says we like football with politics, we want to hear them, want to hear their points of view, we want to hear them give speeches. In fact, we want to see a post-game debate about the debt ceiling among the players, because we really want to hear what these players have to say, because we like entertainment. We like not just sports and football. We want to hear what they have to say. Well, if that's what the NFL owners think that the people want to hear, I mean, just kneeling, what does that mean? They just kneel. That anyone can kneel, but can they give speeches or debate? And do people actually want to see them give speeches? Do people really want to hear their points of view, or do they just want to see them run around and chase a ball and tackle each other? I don't know. I'm asking the question, but it seems to me that this can be easily solved through economics, that if the owners think that their business is harmed by the players kneeling, or if they think their business can be enhanced by not only allowing them to kneel, encouraging them to kneel, in fact, encouraging them to give speeches. We'll see where it goes. I'm only interested from the economic perspective. This is just another distraction issue, I think, but I think from an economic perspective, it's very interesting to see. So far, 32 people. Would I support giving players a half hour before the game or halftime to give political speeches? I would, yes, just to see it happen. I'd like to see what would happen, whether they would lose, business and viewers, not because I want to hear what they have to say, although it would be interesting. Well, most people say no. Now, I interpret that if most people say no, that most people think they probably shouldn't be taking the knee either. All right, what else do we have? So, China takes its place as the top foreign U.S. Treasury holder. We covered that earlier this week. They added 107 billion of U.S. Treasuries to their coffers. That doesn't sound like de-dollarization to me. That sounds like they're buying U.S. Treasuries. Some other stories here. Turkey sets eye on 2,200 tons of gold kept under mattress. They're trying to do the same thing India does. They want to monetize the citizens' gold, as you know, get that wealth away from the citizens and back to the government. Russia, as I mentioned, of all the BRICS countries, Russia seems to be the most prudent, although their credit rating isn't very good. But they have a decent gold position, 6th largest in the world of any central bank. And they don't have much debt, but they don't have much of an economy either. Their economy is mostly oil. But those numbers came out. They added more gold to the reserves. They keep adding gold. Economic data, the housing markets doesn't look too good, at least in terms of buying houses. The prices still go up, but people aren't buying as many houses. Now, U.S. mint sales, horrific. I mean, we are now at the 24th. There's another week left of selling. They've sold total 125,000 American Silver Eagles so far this month, and only 6,000 American Gold Eagles, 1 ounce size. Now, the gold and silver community is saying, oh, gold and silver are great. Bitcoin's in a bubble. they're not buying any gold or silver, that's for sure. They're not buying it through my website. You can buy gold and silver at the BGSC, Gold and Eagle Coins, ST Bullion, Mighty Metals Exchange. You could say, well, my site isn't indicative. It's not. I mean, my site's small. The sales through my sites they don't mean anything, but they reflect exactly what the sales at the US Mint are. So I used to sell a decent amount of gold and silver, and through the affiliate links, which, by the way, it's not investment advice to buy gold or silver, and I do get a commission if you purchase through the links. But when I was selling a lot, the US Mint was selling a lot, and now the US Mint isn't selling any. I'm not selling anyway. So whether it's Trump in office, whether it's cryptocurrencies, the gold buyers and sellers, retail buyers and sellers in the US have lost their nerve. They're not buying. I don't see the sales coming through the way they once did. Here's the story. Check this out. This is Nikki Haley's transcript. They're talking about if Venezuela doesn't improve their democracy. It has nothing to do with them saying they're going to take Chinese yuan for their oil. They might embargo them. Now, when I read this story, I don't know what they mean by embargo. Does that mean they just won't buy, the United States won't buy oil from Venezuela? Well, Venezuela is like the 5th largest exporter of oil, export of oil to the U.S. Or does it mean they're going to stop Venezuela from shipping its oil anywhere? I don't know. The fact that they even said this, that Nikki Haley even said this to a bunch of reporters, to me is astounding, and no one's covering it. Transcript's right here. It's at the bottom. You can check it out. You can just listen to the YouTube that I did on it. I don't know. We'll see what happens there. Well, that's an act of war. If they actually, I mean, it's one thing to not take imports from Venezuela. That'll harm Venezuela. U.S. has enough oil. It doesn't need to import from Venezuela probably. But to stop Venezuela from exporting oil elsewhere, to stop them from exporting it to China, who wants to pay in yuan, that might be a big deal. That's more likely than this gold-backed Chinese yuan story. What else do we have? So here's Jamie Dimon. I just want to show you this chart. This I did a few years ago, but basically you take the annual global silver mining production at 2015 prices was 12.75 billion. Today it's worth about 20 billion. Price has gone up. But JP Morgan has paid 35 billion in fines to settle charges. And he's talking about fraud, about Bitcoin. Maybe, I don't know. It just seems outrageous that and then he gets any company who pays this amount of fines, the CEO should be fired, unless they realize it's a good return on investment. They pay $35 billion, they make $100 billion, $200 billion, they get a good return on investment. I guess he gets paid to make sure that he can get a good settlement price. I don't know. It just seems that, I saw an interview guy saying anyone could run the company as poorly as this, but apparently not, because JP Morgan makes a lot of profit, and it's all that trading stuff that they do where they seem to know where to trade, when to trade, and how to profit from it. Now, remember, China banned, was trying to shut down the crypto exchanges, and we did a story on that, about how that may send the exchanges to decentralization. But now, Bank of Russia, this is the Bank of Russia, they're talking about losing control if they legalize cryptocurrency, but the finance minister favors legalization, and one of Putin's buddies is setting up a Bitcoin mining rig. So who knows where Russia will come down on cryptocurrencies. Fed chatter, we heard from the San Francisco Fed President Williams. He sees calm market reaction to balance sheet unwind. Okay. I have to hand it to them. They have managed to stretch this whole thing out so that people don't get too fussed about it. They did 3 rounds of QE. They raised rates. And they did everything by yakking in between and make it look like they were doing the right thing. It's unbelievable. They managed to, I wouldn't say they pulled it off or the economy is doing well, but they managed to do what they wanted to do, which was bail out the banks, print $4.5 trillion, buy those mortgage-backed securities, agency debt, and a lot of U.S. treasuries, and they managed to raise rates. So here you have it. Indian silver imports, now they were up, but I mentioned in the story that they may be curbed by these new know your client rules. Now jewelers are going to have to take personally identifiable information, tax ID codes from individuals buying over, I think it's $775 worth of Gold or silver used to be $3,200. Here's a story on crypto exchanges about to go decentralized. And that does it for the week. Thank you very much for listening. It was a little long. Thanks for you who actually stayed to the end of this YouTube. You can listen for another minute. Please consider subscribing to Smaulgld, following us on VidMe, and you might be listening to this on VidMe or on BitChute, and of course also YouTube. And also consider becoming a Smaulgld patron. I think I have 10 patrons. Thank you very much to those two handfuls of people who are donating a monthly amount to Smaulgld, and also consider donating via PayPal, Bitcoin, or Litecoin. Thank you very much.